Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have a very rare opportunity today to be speaking with Eric Kaufmann, the managing partner at a company called Sagatica. And Eric was going to share his story on really the evolution of his company, how he got involved in it, the creation, and what their specialties are, so our audience can have a lot more knowledge about why Eric could be someone who could benefit your company. So, Eric, first thing I always like to do is tell me, how did you get involved in this company and get involved in consulting in general?
Thanks, Dennis. I will start that long before I got into the consulting space. I was working in marketing function at Corning Clinical Labs back in the day. And
Okay.
there was an event, there was a change in leadership. So the CEO, the incoming CEO, his name was Ken Freeman. He came in, we had probably about 20,000 employees at the time. And
Wow.
what struck me was the speed with which the changes started cascading. I mean, I was working in San Diego. They were headquartered in New Jersey. And what I saw from that was kind of remarkable, like the power of the executive team and the new CEO to really affect change through a big organization over a great global footprint. And then, that followed. I was being mentored at the time by our general manager, and I saw up close and personal the impact that an executive team can have one way or the other, right? So if they're aligned and they're coherent, then you have this, good working space with good priorities and good culture. If they're fractured and they're sort of bickering at each other, then you have, the
Yeah,
downstream
sure.
effects. Yeah, the downstream effects. And so then in 99, I came to a juncture, and the juncture was, do I stay on the CEO track and go with one company, one team, one set of objectives, or do I go solo and really bring this passion that I have for, cultivating good decisions and good leaders and good teams and make it into a consulting gig, which was the riskier move by a long shot. It was the same year that I got married. And my wife kept saying, after we got married, and because we got married, I started my own practice. And the next day we bought a house. The next year we bought a house. The year after that we had a child. The year after that we had another child. So for the first 3 or 4 years, it was kind of madness. And my wife every night would say, "Have you sent out any resumes lately?"
I can relate to that story because I lived in San Diego for 33 years of my life, Encinitas area, North
Oh,
County.
gosh, the best part of town. Yeah.
I loved it. And when I moved there, I started my company, which I still have, in 1988. I'd been there for 2 years, and I said, "I'm gonna just quit what I'm doing. I'm tired of corporate life." I'd worked at Xerox Corporation, and I was in the mortgage industry, and I said, "I'm gonna take the best and create a company," and I did. And here it is 28 years later. I've still been doing it, actually 38 years later.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and I love it. But podcasting is something I really enjoy, talking to executives, professionals like yourself, understanding their journey and their story. It's fascinating to me, and I love getting people to share it. So are you still in San Diego?
I'm still in San Diego. We're still running the firm. It's on its second, no, third name now. I guess it's called Sagatica. And
Right.
kudos on nailing the name. But yeah, so it's been 26 years of doing this. And um, it's possible after a while to really burn out on what you do. I
Mhm.
don't feel that way at all. I feel more
Wonderful.
motivated and energized and sort of fulfilled by the work. So I'm very fortunate
Good.
now.
So obviously you shared a little bit about what you went through observing an acquisition or a merger or just change in leadership, and the effectiveness they executed that with impressed you, and indelibly etched in your mind, hey, this is doable. Now I just have to figure out how I can make sure I can transfer that knowledge. So when you look at what you do currently, why is it important to you to be able to offer that to the companies you work with?
Why is it important to me personally? I mean, why does it?
Right.
Well, I'll tell you sort of the motivation behind the motivation, as it were, right? So, I mean, there's a commercial motivation. This is what I do for a living, right? So that's
Right.
important to me, to my family. Um, but I concluded many years ago, this is part of why I sort of made the leap, right, from the quote safety, although we know that's not that safe, of a job to
Mhm.
to having my own firm. But part of it was this realization back then, and I think it's much more profound now, that the shaping forces of humanity have shifted in a dramatic way over the past, I don't know, let's call it 70 years or so. And what I mean by that is um, it used to be that the human culture, the human dynamic, the human planet, and the planet where humans have an effect was shaped by religious leaders or kings, right? You had the priests, you had your shamans, you had your kings, you had your
You're right.
queens. But since the Industrial Revolution, and much more accelerated after World War II, it became commercial forces, right? These are business leaders that are making the change and making the difference in the world. And what dawned on me was that for us to have perpetuity and sustainability, I don't just mean sort of sustainability of planet, but I mean the human race to continue to evolve, and my kids and my grandkids to have a really good shot at a good life, that the levers of power are no longer, necessarily in the hands of business or church. They're in the hands of, government or church. They're in the hands of business and business leaders.
Right.
And it became like remarkably compelling to me that we can't just relegate leadership and particularly executive roles, to being good P&L execution. They have to understand that the mantle of responsibility is on their shoulders, and that they have to awaken to that and be what I've sort of come to call, others have called it as well, more conscious leaders, right?
Okay.
And so what really drives me is, working diligently with these executives to, you know, there is no scenario in which we're not working towards their improvement in P&L, whatever the P&L metrics are. And they can also be more awake, more intentional, more tuned in human beings that are making a difference, not just to their employees, but in the entire ecosystem that they're touching. So, that's the drive for me, right? Is how do we combine a remarkable capacity to achieve wildly successful outcomes with this deep responsibility that we're bearing as business leaders on both the current and the future of our humanity.
I like that because profitability always going to be, unfortunately, unless you're a nonprofit, it's going to be number one priority. But the reality is, when you do the other things you're discussing, you're going to solve a lot of problems like retention of employees, more production out of your employees, and things that actually will contribute to that bottom line in ways that aren't obvious at first, but they're really critical in the long run. And you observe that, and it's so true. People don't see that, but they need to be more cognizant of it. So when you look at your ICP, your ideal client profile, tell me who that is.
Well, I'll tell you, who they're not to begin with, right? So my ICP is not a startup, right? In the startup phase, this is like do or die, right? If you're in a
Right.
startup, the notion of sophisticated executive models and ways of leading, they don't give a shit about this. They just need to survive and see market.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival. And so they have very little bandwidth or appetite, even if they're well funded, right? On the other side of the spectrum, we have sort of the behemoth, sort of publicly traded companies. With all due respect, it's difficult for the actual executive leaders, even though I saw the example of Ken Freeman. There are limits. There are limits of size, there are limits of scope, there are limits of regulation, and there are limits of massive investor influence, right? So the executive teams of mid-sized companies are the most interesting and the most effective because they have direct control, they have direct influence, they have the choices they can make about, what to fund, what to cut, who to bring. And so, our ICP really is, probably going to be north of 50 million just because of the fees that we charge, right? The small companies are not going to be able to afford us, and kind of south of 2 billion. So I know that's a big range, but what marks them specifically is what I've come to identify as kind of they're in a 3.0 version of the business.
Okay.
Right. So the 1.0, they got established, they didn't die. 2.0, they grew and they differentiated. 3.0, now they're looking at scale, they're looking at systemization, they're looking at professional leadership, they're looking at perpetuity, at executive development. These are the things that are the 3.0 reality. Often there's maybe a new CEO or a newer CEO, and they're trying to really bring a new version of the company to life. that's our sweet spot. That's where we really,
There
we
you go.
really do well.
And there's no set number of employees. It's the revenue generation from the company. Do you have
You know,
si-
number of employees is somewhat indicative, but it tends to be more, look, even revenues, 'cause then there's guys trading, futures that are doing $50 million a year, with two of them in their
Mhm.
bedroom. That's not going to work, right?
Right.
But, we're typically looking at sort of, again, you start going beyond 100 employees, 150 employees, the game has changed, right?
Right.
And at that point, you're crossing into, again, you're post 50 million. So, our sweet spot, like I said, 150 to maybe 4,000 employees in that neighborhood.
Okay. Somewhere in that ballpark. Okay.
Yeah, because that still remains, mostly held, privately owned. And that, like I said, we have a few publicly traded companies. I love that I'm working with them. It's not who we're going after, right? It's if they
Right.
come through the pipeline, yes, please, but it's not where I'm
Yeah.
going to hunt.
Right. So that leads me to my next question. Where are you going to the hunt? How do people know about your company? How do you market to get to these customers? So obviously, probably the first one is word of mouth referral. That's probably your strongest way to get new clients, I would think, is what you've done for time you've been doing it now for 27 years. You've obviously got satisfied clients. But what about, do you do any direct marketing such as LinkedIn? Do you do social media? Have you thought of conferences? Tell me how you get your name out there.
Yeah, so you won't be surprised at all that your assumption is spot on, right? The best form of marketing is referrals, and that's true for you and almost all your guests if we're in the consulting space, right? I mean, there's something quite magical about doing great work and having a CEO kind of crow about this to their fellow
Yeah.
CEO, right? That
Yes.
cuts through a lot of noise. Um,
That's the best feeling you get.
it's the best one, right? Podcast, exactly what we're doing here. I find
Okay.
that to be a remarkably valuable channel because a referral essentially gets me in the room with someone that's already sold on me. That's the beautiful thing about referral. But a podcast gets me in the ears of someone who's never heard of Sagatica, never heard of Eric Kaufmann, and lets them sit with how I think, for 25, 35, 45 minutes and get a chance to get acquainted. So this is a really, I think, valuable channel for that.
And it's growing. It's growing more and more.
It's growing more and more because it's good, because it's useful, right? I mean, it's a way to build trust, right? Whomever is
Mhm.
tuned into you already trusts you, Dennis, right? And they say, well, if Dennis is trustworthy, then he's going to bring on people that he believes are trustworthy. So we're already beginning that critical trust relationship. And then, yes, there are other channels, LinkedIn, outreach, thought leadership. I published 4 books, there are magazines that
Okay.
we put articles in. And then don't forget, sort of, I think the second best after referrals would be speaking at conferences.
Right.
The opportunity.
What type of conference would you be attending where they would have you speak at? Give me an example of those conferences.
I spoke recently at the GBA. It's the Geoprofessional Business Association, and so
Okay.
there's CEOs who are in the geotech and engineering space that come there for once a year to sort of network and explore trends in their industry, and I get a chance to spend an hour on stage with all these decision makers and tell them how we're affecting leadership. It's a beautiful way to get it going, as an
Oh,
example.
it's outstanding. I've done so many conferences. There's times you get to a point where you go, not another conference, but the good ones are worth it. Always to attend. And if you get a speaking engagement, they're huge. So
Yeah.
that leads me to a question that I always wonder with your sale at your level. You're dealing with multiple employee stakeholders that are involved at decision making and decision influencing levels. So someone reaches out, they saw you at a conference, saw you on a podcast, know your referral or LinkedIn, and the referral is going to be a little bit easier because you already have established relevance. But the other ones, they're still going to be curious about what is it you do, and more importantly, now you've got to go through their hierarchy, and hopefully it's not an RFP you have to do every single time, but hopefully it's something where you can go in there and say, okay, let's talk about, here's our point of contact, go through the channels and end up with starting a contract. What's that time frame look like, Eric? from contact to contract?
Sales cycle is on the short end, 3 months, which is, less typical. On the long end, a year, which is also less typical. So it's really 6 to 9 months is probably fairly typical.
Okay.
Um,
And is that because you have to navigate through committee meetings or get approval at different levels, and eventually it gets to where they finally give you a statement
so
of work and we get going?
yeah, so I'll say that I don't think I've responded to an RFP in years. So we're not looking down the RFP channel because
Thank God.
we're just not, right? And
Yeah.
my audience is really the senior executive. So I am 85% of the time talking to the CEO, or if not the CEO, then the COO, right? We're entering at the executive level because we're
Oh,
actually
C-suite.
working
Right.
at the executive level, at the C-suite, right? And so it's not an RFP situation hardly ever. It is often a competitive situation, right? Because if we've gotten into the conversation, that means that something has stirred in them. For a CEO to say, I'm going to hire somebody is quite a leap. It is quite a leap, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they're the ones who are supposed to know what's going on. They're the ones who are supposed to, create, not singularly, but bring the team together to solve all the problems. For the CEO and their team to sit back and go, I think we should hire somebody to help us with our own team. That's a big leap.
Mhm.
It's a
Oh,
big
it's
leap.
huge.
It's huge, right? And so that's the time. I mean, you know, our sort of challenge is other providers, to be sure, to some degree, but the greater challenge is apathy and arrogance. you
Oh,
know,
I think that's perfectly worded. Yeah. People
yeah,
don't
because
want to, first and foremost, admit there's an issue.
exactly, exactly. And so, and I don't mean arrogance like I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that's what's going on, right? If you're the CEO, if you're the C-suite, you're expected to know the answers. That's exactly what everyone's looking to you for. So for you to
That's
sit
why
back
you're
and
in
go,
that job.
that's
The
why you're gonna
reality is,
right? And
yeah,
there's a,
that's
there's
why
a
you're
thing,
the CEO.
there's a thing that I came to call over the years. I call it the collusion of delusion.
I like
And
that.
the
I like
collusion of
that.
delusion looks like this. The collusion of delusion is the CEO's walking around going, I know what's going on. I know where we're going. I know how to make this happen. I know all the answers, right? And they don't. And they know they don't. And that's not a criticism. It's just a reality of being human. The folks in the organization are going, oh, our boss knows where they're going. They know what's happening. They know how to answer all the problems. There's a delusion on both ends that so all the answers exist. And there's a collusion that we're going to agree on this delusion, because if we really say the CEO is not entirely sure where to go, everyone freaks out. And
Right.
so we have to overcome that. And what goes from contact to contract is essentially kind of a trust building journey and a relaxation journey for the CEO to know that he or she is not going to look bad. This is not going to sort of be a demerit against them. This is not going to weaken their authority or power. That's the time element, quite frankly.
Yeah, I
And
would think it would be more psychological than factual. The reality is they need it. The psychology is, oh my gosh, do I have to take this stuff? Because if I do, then I'm exposed in some form or fashion, unless I really can embrace this is supportive, it's not replacing.
and yeah, and so to your point, but actually, I would like to bring this back to your previous question about the ICP, because one of the features of the
Sure.
ICP is an executive who's actually open enough and willing enough to take the risk to be vulnerable, right? And I don't mean vulnerable like in the big emotional way, like you're gonna have to talk about your mother and your childhood, but I mean as in, you're gonna have to be willing to question some of your assumptions, because part of my job, part of my team's job, is not necessarily to come in and to answer all your questions. Part of our job is to come in and question all your answers.
When you think about when you go through and work with someone, obviously retention of the client is a crucial component. You don't want to have to go out there and keep getting new ones if you can maintain and work with a client for a longer period of time. So do you have contracts that they sign for a period of time? And how do you manage your retention strategy?
Yeah, this is a conversation of consultant to consultant, right? How do we how do we not keep going out there
Hmm.
but y- y- uh, let me say this to you first. Sort of philosophically, I've struggled with this for decades now, right? Because in my heart of hearts, what really turns me on is what I call cultivating agency, right? I really want the people around me to become more competent and confident in what they do so they're less dependent and reliant on me. That's kind of my philosophical bent. That's how I raised my kids. That's how I work with my own team,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Now, commercially, how do we ensure that there's a value creation that's ongoing so that people want to keep engaging with me? So I don't know. I'm just being honest with you, right? I have struggled with this philosophically, right? Because in my ideal world, I'll spend the least amount possible so that I can hand them over the most agency in their own experience and let them go. Um, and so, um, anyway,
It gets to almost to a point of diminishing return, because if you keep going and saying, "Hey, we need to now, we may need to do this, or this is another project," and they're going, "Hey, we've already accomplished what you had told us we would accomplish. We've achieved that." You feel great, Eric, about that. But then you also don't want to lose that client who's been valuable. But really, you're kind of, you're at the 100-yard football field. You got the kickoff. You run all the way back here at the 5-yard line. You don't want to run out of bounds, cross the
right,
finish line.
absolutely.
And so,
So,
so when you
but
cross that finish line, you're basically done. You might delegate to your team some stuff, but you don't need to be involved much anymore.
right. So you're tracking on some of the things that we're doing, right? One, one way that it sustains is sort of, and my partner Rick talks about this all the time. He loves this notion of give people what they want so that we can ultimately give them what they need.
Mhm.
And a lot of consulting engagements begin with, okay, so this executive and this executive team have relaxed enough to say, okay, we'll take on this engagement, and this is what we think we need, which is really what they want. And so we have to kind of
Mhm.
help them accomplish what they ask for, and then show them through assessment, through actual experience, through the process that there's something additional that is actually kind of bubbling underneath that. And we're not trying to make stuff up. We're just trying to get to the core, right? Oftentimes people talk about this kind of the surface, and we're talking about the core. So helping them see what are the deeper features that we can help them address is one way to sort of extend beyond what they ask for. And then the other part is, to your point, I have this remarkable team, and Rick and Stacy and Kelsey and Tara and all the other folks on the team. We are engaging in a way that continues to add value, and that's what the client ultimately is looking for, right? Can I
Mhm.
continue to receive value? I mean, the value proposition is not just because it feels good. We are pretty maniacal about tracking and measuring ROI and the impact of the work that we're doing. We have gone so far, and with more regularity, like in year 2 and year 3, we say, here's the fee, and we take 25, sometimes 30% of the fee. We take that off the table, say, you know what, this fee we're going to take off the table, and we're going to have to earn back. So in other words, year
Love it. I like
2,
that.
rather than charging you, 100,000,
Tax it. Yeah, it's
I'm going
tax
to charge
minus 25%, right?
I'm going to charge you 70,000, and my 30,000 will be earned based on whether we hit the metrics and the values that we've identified together, which we negotiate, right? What is most important to hit?
Right.
And oh, by the way, if we exceed expectation, there's a formula for how do we go beyond 100,000, right?
Good.
So it's not entirely naive. But when a CEO, when an executive team says, well, wait a second, you're putting some of your fees at risk to ensure that we hit our KPIs, that's very compelling, right? And that
It's
allows us to
huge.
stay in the game a lot longer, quite frankly, because now we've moved from being sort of a pure consultant who's just there for the money to being a bit of a business partner, right? We've invested.
No, definitely. I mean, I love that. I think it's a very clever idea. I mean, I try creative pricing as well, but that's a brilliant one, and I commend you for that, because that really takes them to the position of looking, oh my God, these guys are really committed to making it work. It's not just they're coming in and doing a consulting job. Now they're going to put some of their profitability on the line, and I think it's a brilliant strategy, especially with the CEO. So when
Yeah.
you look at your,
And
go
I'll
ahead.
say there's one other piece because we have AI is sort of all over the place, and I don't know if you get into it or not, but we've actually developed over the last couple of years our own platform called Sagata Coach, and so we now have this software platform. So, in effect, our business is now a software-enabled service, right? That we have this software where the work happens inside the platform, right? So the work doesn't evaporate between sessions. Everyone has continuity, and it's not just a tracking tool bolted onto the engagement, right? The platform is where the work is actually happening, right? It holds their KPIs, it ties into their strategic objectives, it connects to their financial metrics. That's partly how we can put some of our stuff at risk because we have such great sort of data and access in real time to what's
Right.
going on. And then over time, ideally, they start working in the Sagata Coach platform, even in our absence, and that becomes now we have sort of a bit of a licensing agreement for them to use the platform. So we can be ongoing. Our presence and physical touch might be less, but now we have licensing fees as they continue to use the software.
No, it's really smart, and utilization of that technology effectively, some people struggle with, but it sounds like you've integrated it already and we're ahead of the curve a little bit, so that's smart. Looking at your future as you look into balance of this year, heading into next year, if you want to call it up to 2030, what do you see as the biggest challenges in your business and your industry?
So you're talking about challenges for the consulting space?
Yes. Mhm.
Again, I don't think this is going to be surprising, right? AI is doing a freaking number on all of us, right? And
Really?
I had a friend of mine, we were talking about the difference. So knowledge now is utterly democratized and completely commoditized, right? Because you and I and anybody can go to chat or any of these AI bots, and the knowledge embedded in these platforms is insane. There's no way you and I can know that much, right?
No, there's no way.
There's just no way. I mean, that's what the tool does. And so what we have is we have wisdom, and the distinction between knowledge and wisdom. I just got this yesterday. I posted something on LinkedIn about knowledge versus wisdom, and a guy put a comment. He said, "Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad."
That's clever. I like that.
I never heard, and I'm like, I'm going to use that someday. I didn't realize I'd use it today, but
Guess what? He didn't patent it, so it's good.
but I think the challenge we're facing is how do we scale wisdom? And interestingly, I didn't know this question was necessarily the question on the table today, but I named my company Sagatica, and I mentioned to you briefly. Sagatica is an odd name. It comes from the Latin word sagacitas, which literally means wisdom, and we get sage or sagacious, right? And so the idea was to cultivate executive wisdom. And I think that what the consulting firms are up against is that much of what we've done in the past, even things like a SWOT analysis, a SWOT analysis or a strategic sort of planning. I mean, so much of that can be fed into the machine, and they can come up with stuff so quickly and so effectively. What they don't have, what we bring, is judgment and perspective and discernment. And I think to the degree that we continue to help the organizations at that level with judgment and discernment and perspective, there's room for us to play. But to the degree that we are, manipulating data or doing just research, those organizations are going to suffer greatly. Yeah.
Yeah, because they can be easily replaced. I mean, there's data.
Yeah, and not unlike what we're doing. We're using AI, but we're not using AI to replace anything. We're using AI to augment.
Yeah,
right?
complement.
In that regard,
correct.
we're going to be, we're setting ourselves well.
It's a tool. It's not a replacement. And if people come to grips with that, I think they're starting to slowly realize that. And people are also starting to become cognizant of hidden cost of AI because it's not cheap. And there's eventually a point where you're going to pay the piper on the back end if you're not aware of people are constantly in your company accessing AI. There's a bill to pay, and it will come. And some of that is something that people aren't really aware of. They don't think about because they're not the ones who are paying the bill. And larger companies who have that access to AI and utilizing it, it's not inexpensive, and people will come to
It's not
that as a
inexpensive.
human.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So let's look at the opportunities now. We talked about the challenge. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for your company going forward in the consulting space?
Um, the biggest opportunities is what we're currently working on. So, I've spent years and years and years doing this work. We've got a team, but in the last 3 or 4 years, we've really been working on scale. And so
Okay.
it's it's been a remarkable experience over the last 3 years or so of kind of eating my own dog food, right? So all the wonderful work that we do with other organizations about scale is now coming to roost, right? And so
Yeah, right.
the the upside of the scale is that, again, kind of, it's not secretly, but for me behind the scenes is how do we, so, internally we talk about our sort of mission is to mint 10,000 conscious leaders. That's the idea.
Okay.
How do we mint 10,000 conscious leaders, right? So how do we get to market in such scale that we can really raise the level of consciousness, the level of conscientiousness among senior level executives, C-suite executives, so that they can not only, do remarkable things for the business, but be the responsible humans in the social realm and in the environmental realm and in the human domain. And so the opportunity for us is to scale, right? It's to use AI in an intelligent way. It's to implement the systems so that folks can, how do you systematize people maturing and growing up, even as they're doing the work? And I think that's a massive opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's a massive opportunity because this is one thing that AI just isn't built for. It is not built for nurturing more humanity in humans. It's built for
No.
solving problems faster. And so the opportunity for us
Exactly right.
is to stitch together the ability to solve problems and get to results with this remarkable way to sort of mature and evolve people so that the executive teams is more coherent, more effective, and that the cultures around them are more engaged, and ultimately the businesses are running more efficiently and more beneficially to the environment around them.
When you think about it, it's what was started your company. Everything that we said at the very beginning of this conversation is coming at the end of our conversation, your mission. And with that being said, so now you got to realize, how do I do that on the scale to get it out there? And I think you're on the right path with what you're doing technique-wise. Obviously, people embrace what you do and they have good referrals. The conventions you talk about, there's a lot of different things. And I think you're right where you need to be, Eric, to do that scaling. It's just a function of what methodology do you want to choose to achieve it. And our time just flew by. It was 33 minutes of conversation. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I hope you have as well.
Indeed.
I really like what you're doing and I lived in San Diego for 35 years of my life. I currently reside in Florida and I miss San Diego. Great place. My children are there doing their deal and one of the most beautiful cities in the entire world.
I love it.
Enjoy San Diego. As long as that gas price eventually starts to come down, it'll be better. But otherwise, you're in a great spot. Eric, how can people reach you? What's the best way for people to reach out and touch you and your company?
The easiest way is to go to our website. It's sagatica.com, Sagatica, Sagatica.com. My email is Eric, ERIC, at Sagatica.com. And
Okay.
hit me up on LinkedIn. It seems to be a place where we convene easily and effortlessly. And it's Eric Kaufmann on LinkedIn. And yeah, by all means, if anyone's intrigued or anyone's, intrigued is one thing. If anyone's feeling a little scared because this is hitting home, that'd be another great conversation.
There you go. I like it. Eric, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you have. Thank you for
Yes.
being on Principal Podcast.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.